Hello again. I will continue reading Chapter 1 of Ramona Quimby, Age 8, by Beverly Clearly. You give me back my eraser. Encumbered her lunchbox, Ramona chased Danny, who ran, ducking and dodging among the first and second graders. When she was about to catch him, he tossed her eraser to the other boy. If her lunchbox had not banged against her knees, Ramona might have been able to grab him. Unfortunately, the bell rang first. "Yard apes!" yelled Ramona. Her name for the sort of boys who always got the best balls, who were always first on the playground, and who chased their soccer balls through other people's hopscotch games. She saw her pink eraser fly back into Danny's hands. "Yard apes!" she yelled again, tears of anger in her eyes. "Yucky yard apes!" The boys, of course, paid no attention. Yard apes. I hope I don't hear anyone using that language at school. Still fuming, Ramona entered her new school and climbed the stairs to find her assigned classroom, which she discovered looked over roofs and treetops to Mount Hood in the distance. Mount Hood's in Oregon. This takes place in Portland. I wish it would erupt, she thought, because she felt like exploding with anger. So, if you can make a text-to-self connection or text-to-world connection, Mount Hood is like Mount Rainier to us. You can see it from Portland, just like you can see Mount Rainier from Seattle. Ramona's new room was filled with excitement and confusion. She saw some people she had known at her old school. Others were strangers. Everyone was talking at once, shouting greetings to old friends, or looking over those who would soon become friends, rivals, or enemies. Ramona missed Howie, who had been assigned to another room. But wouldn't you know? That yard ape, Danny, was sitting at a desk, still wearing his baseball cap, and tossing Ramona's new eraser from one hand to the other. Ramona was too frustrated to speak. She wanted to hit him. How dare he spoil her day? "All right, you guys, quiet down," said the teacher. Ramona was startled to hear her class called "you guys." Most teachers she had known would say something like, "I feel I'm talking very loud. Is it because the room is noisy?" She chose a chair at the table at the front of the room and studied her new teacher, a strong-looking woman with short hair and a deep tan. "Like my swimming teacher," thought Ramona. "My name is Mrs. Whaley," said the teacher, as she printed her name on the blackboard. "W-H-A-L-E-Y. I'm a whale with a Y for a tail." She laughed, and so did her class. Then the whale with a Y for a tail handed Ramona some slips of paper. "Please pass these out," she directed. "We need some name tags until I get to know you." Ramona did as she was told, and as she walked among the desks she discovered her new sandals squeaked. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Ramona giggled, and so did the rest of the class. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Ramona went up one aisle and down the other. The last person she gave a slip to was the boy from the bus, who was still wearing his baseball cap. "You give me back my eraser, you yard ape," she whispered. "Try and get it, Bigfoot," he whispered back with a grin. Ramona stared at her feet. Bigfoot? Bigfoot was a hairy creature 10 feet tall, who was supposed to leave huge footprints in the mountain snow of southern Oregon. Some people thought they had seen Bigfoot slipping through the forests, but no one had ever been able to prove he really existed. Bigfoot, indeed. Ramona's feet had grown, but they were not huge. She was not going to let him get away with this insult. "Superfoot to you, yard ape," she said right out loud, realizing too late that she had given herself a new nickname. To her astonishment, Yard Ape pulled her eraser out of his pocket and handed it to her with a grin. Well, with her nose in the air, Ramona squeaked back to her seat. She felt so triumphant that she returned the longest way around and bent her feet as much as possible to make the loudest noise possible. She had done the right thing. She had not let Yard Ape upset her by calling her Bigfoot, and now she had her eraser in her hand. He would probably call her Superfoot forever, but she did not care. Superfoot was a name she had given herself. That made all the difference. She had won. Ramona became aware that she was squeaking in the midst of an unusual silence. She stopped mid-squeak. Whoops.
Way.
I know what way means. She stopped mid-squeak when she saw that her new teacher was watching her with a little smile. The class was watching the teacher. "We all know you have some musical shoes," said Mrs. Whaley. Of course, the class laughed. By walking with stiff legs and not bending her feet, Ramona reached her seat without squeaking at all. She did not know what to think. At first she thought Mrs. Whaley's remark was a reprimand, but then maybe her teacher was just trying to be funny. She couldn't tell about grown-ups sometimes. Ramona finally decided that any teacher who would let Yardape wear his baseball cap in the classroom really wasn't fussy about squeaking shoes. Ramona bent over her paper and wrote slowly and carefully in cursive, Ramona Quimby, age 8. She admired the look of what she had written, and she was happy. She liked feeling tall in her new school. She liked, or was pretty sure she liked, her non-fussy teacher. Yardape, well, he was a problem, but so far she had not let him get the best of her for keeps. Besides, although she might never admit it to anyone, now that she had her eraser back, she liked him, sort of. Maybe she enjoyed a challenge. Ramona began to draw a fancy border, all scallops and curlicues around her name. She was happy, too, because her family had been happy that morning, and because she was big enough for her family to depend on. If only she could do something about Willa Jean. Chapter 2. At Howie's House. Now be nice to Willa Jean, said Mrs. Quimby as she handed Ramona her lunchbox. Grown-ups often forgot that no child likes to be ordered to be nice to another child. Ramona made a face. Mother, do you have to say that every single morning? She asked in exasperation. Deep down inside, where she hid her darkest secrets, Ramona sometimes longed to be horrid to Willa Jean. Horrid means horrible. Okay, I'll try to remember, said Mrs. Quimby with a little laugh. I know it isn't easy. She kissed Ramona and said, Cheer up and run along, or you'll miss your bus. Being a member of the Quimby family in the 3rd grade was harder than Ramona had expected. Her father was often tired, in a hurry, or studying on the dining-room table, which meant no one could disturb him by watching television. At school, she was still not sure how she felt about Mrs. Whaley. Liking a teacher was important. Ramona had discovered when she was in the 1st grade, and even though her family understood, Ramona still dreaded that part of the day spent at Howie's house in the company of Mrs. Kemp and Willa Jean. Those were the bad parts of the 3rd grade. There were good parts, too. Ramona enjoyed riding the bus to school, and she enjoyed keeping Yardape from getting the best of her. Then another good part of the 3rd grade began the 2nd week of school. Just before her class was to make its weekly visit to the school library, Mrs. Whaley announced, Today, and from now on, we're going to have sustained silent reading every day. Ramona liked the sound of sustained silent reading, even though she was not sure what it meant, because it sounded important. Mrs. Whaley continued, This means that every day after lunch we are going to sit at our desks and read silently to ourselves any book we choose in the library. Even mysteries? Someone asked. Even mysteries, said Mrs. Whaley. Do we have to give book reports on what we read? Asked one suspicious member of the class. No book reports on your sustained silent reading books, Mrs. Whaley promised the class. Then she went on. I don't think sustained silent reading sounds very interesting, so I think we'll call it something else. Here she printed 4 big letters on the blackboard. As she pointed, she read out, D-E-A-R. Can anyone guess what letters these stand for? Can you guess what letters these stand for? The class thought and thought. Do everything all right? Suggested someone. A good thought, but not the right answer. Don't eat a reader, suggested Yardape. Mrs. Whaley laughed and told him to try again. As Ramona thought, she stared out the window, at the blue sky, the treetops, and in the distance, the snow-capped peak of Mount Hood, looking like a giant licked ice cream cone. R could stand for run, and A for and. Drop everything and run, Ramona burst out. Mrs. Whaley, who was not the sort of teacher who expected everyone to raise a hand before speaking, laughed and said, Almost right, Ramona, but you've forgotten Almost right, Ramona, but have you forgotten we are talking about reading? Drop everything and read, chorused the rest of the class. Ramona felt silly. She should have thought of that herself. Ramona decided that she preferred sustained silent reading to dear because it sounded more grown up. When the time came for everyone to drop everything and read, she sat quietly doing her sustained silent reading. How peaceful it was to be left alone in school. She could read without trying to hide her book under her desk or behind a bigger book. She was not expected to write lists of words she did not know, so she could figure them out by skipping and guessing. Mrs. Whaley did not expect the class to write summaries of what they read either, so she did not have to choose easy books to make sure she would get the summary right. Now, if Mrs. Whaley would leave her alone to draw, too, school would be almost perfect. Yes, sustained silent reading was the best part of the day. Howie and Ramona talked it over after school, and they agreed as they walked from the bus to his house. They found two of the new friends he had made at Cedarhurst School waiting with their bicycles. Ramona sat on the Kemp's front steps, her arms clasped around her knees, her sustained silent reading book of fairy tales beside her, and looked with longing at the boys' two bicycles while Howie wheeled his bicycle out of the garage. Because Howie was kind, and because Ramona was his friend, he asked, "Ramona, would you like to ride my bicycle to the corner and back?" Would she? Ramona jumped up, eager to take a turn. "Just once," said Howie. Ramona mounted the bicycle, and while the three boys silently watched, teetered and wobbled to the corner without falling off. Having to dismount to turn the bicycle around was embarrassing, but riding back was easier. At least she didn't wobble quite so much, and she managed to dismount even as if she were used to doing so. "All I need is a little practice," thought Ramona, as Howie seized his bicycle and rode off with his friends, leaving her with nothing to do but pick up her book and join Willa Jean in the house. Now that Willa Jean was going to nursery school, she was full of ideas. Dressing up was one of them. She met Ramona at the door with an old curtain wrapped around her shoulders. "Hurry up and have your snack," she ordered, while her grandmother was sat watching television and crocheting. Crocheting is like knitting with... I know you know, Jacob. Jacob's listening to the story, too. The snack turned out to be pineapple juice and rye crisps, a pleasant change for Ramona, even though Willa Jean stood impatiently beside her, watching every swallow until she had finished. "Now, I'll be the lady, and you be the dog," directed Willa Jean. "But I don't want to be the dog," said Ramona. Willa Jean's grandmother looked up from her crocheting, reminding Ramona with a glance that Ramona's job in the Quimby family was to get along at the Kemps. Did she have to be a dog if Willa Jean wanted her to be then? "You have to be the dog," said Willa Jean. "Why?" said Ramona. She kept an eye on Mrs. Kemp, and she wondered how far she dared go in resisting Willa Jean's orders. "Because I'm a beautiful lady, and I say so," Willa Jean informed her. "I'm a bigger, beautifuler, richer lady," said Ramona, who felt neither beautiful nor rich, but certainly did not want to crawl around on her hands and knees barking. "We can't both be the lady," said Willa Jean, "and I said it first." Ramona could not argue the justice of this point. "What kind of dog am I supposed to be?" she asked, to stall for time. She glanced wistfully at her book lying in the chair, the book she was supposed to read at school, but which she was enjoying so much she brought it home. While Willa Jean was thinking, Mrs. Kemp said, "Sweetheart, don't forget Bruce is coming over to play in a few minutes." "Bruce who?" asked Ramona, hoping Willa Jean and Bruce would play together and leave her alone to read. "Bruce who doesn't wee-wee in the sandbox," was Willa Jean's prompt answer. "Willa Jean!" Mrs. Kemp was shocked. "What a thing to say about your little friend." Ramona was not shocked. She understood that there must be a second Bruce at Willa Jean's nursery school, a Bruce who did wee-wee in the sandbox. So I'm going to stop there for today, and we'll carry on reading Chapter 2 tomorrow. Goodbye.